Hello, hello. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Pushing Film live stream. Thanks for joining me today if you're here live. I can see that just a few people are jumping on right now, but if you're not familiar with this type of live stream, it's what I like to call the contact sheets series. And so far it's really focused on the street photography process, mostly of rolls of film that I've shot out on the street and going over those photos and just sort of breaking down the process, why I took the photos the way I did, what could have been done better, and just trying to share that exploration with you, which I think would be helpful to anyone else out there who enjoys shooting street and wants to always improve and get better at it and enjoys it as much as I do. So if you are here live, feel free to drop a comment in the live chat. Let me know how you're going, where you're watching from. I'm doing this at a slightly different time than usual. Oftentimes on a Sunday, I'll do it in the late morning here in Melbourne time. This time it's about 5 p.m. here, and I thought I'd mix it up. Maybe this will allow some of you guys over in Europe to jump on. I know it's probably early in the morning, and yeah, it's a weird time if you're in the US. I guess it's really late, but this might be more convenient for all my fellow Aussies. So with this particular roll of film, it was shot on the... where is it? Sorry, bring that out of the way. Kodak Vision 500T film stock. And it was all done on my Leica MA, which is this camera here. This is what I mainly use for shooting all my street photography, especially with this lens that's on it right now. It's the Zeiss 35mm f2.8. Sometimes I'll switch to the 28mm Voigtlander Ultron. But yeah, that's what it was shot on. And if you're curious, the Kodak Vision 500T was developed by myself at home in Tetenal C41 chemistry. I've spoken a lot about this process of developing cinema film, ECN2 intended film in C41, but really liking those results and in fact preferring it to the added expense and trouble of doing ECN2. If you want to get into all that, I've done previous content on the channel. So just to give you a bit of a background on this roll, and yeah, thank you to Jared Wilson in the chat from New Zealand. All right, thanks. I got someone from New Zealand. That's great. And yeah, this roll was shot, when was it? A few weeks ago now. So if you're not familiar with the situation here in Australia, especially Melbourne and Sydney, we finally came out of lockdown. So that is great. That means, you know, I've been getting out and shooting street again. And it's just such a relief to be able to do that and to have a bit more freedom. So I hope you know, anyone else who's here in Australia can relate to that. But anyway, this roll, was probably shot in the first few days of the reopening of Melbourne. And just scrolling through, giving you an idea here of what I've got. I did pick out some favorites, but I thought, let's go through the whole roll and just sort of kind of breeze through them and show you all the shots. But yeah, Melbourne had just come out of lockdown and people were out in force. So you can see this scene here from St. Kilda, popular beach here in Melbourne. I had just loaded the roll. I had shot one previous to this, so I thought, hey, it's getting dark, let's load the 500T, and that way going into nighttime it'll be handy having the tungsten balance. First shot on the roll, nothing too special, but it shows you the scenery, the crowd that I was at in St. Kilda. Second one I thought was a little bit better. So I think I had seen these two, this couple. I found them interesting, their outfits, you know, their presence, and the fact that they were in the foreground from my perspective to this massive crowd in the background, which I had been amongst earlier, shooting sort of closer to the crowd. But yeah, side by side, I did correct the white balance a little bit on the right hand one because I preferred it. You can see that I took that first shot and I think they turned away from the camera, and I waited for them to turn around and show a little bit of their faces before taking that second shot, which was my intention to kind of get a little bit more of that personality into the photo. So that was my reasoning for that. And then moving forward through the roll, there was a heavy police presence kind of scouring the beach because of alcohol. They were, you know, it's an alcohol-free zone, so they're going around trying to stop people from drinking and whatnot. So, you know, it was just add an interesting element there, having the heavy police presence, which at the moment you're only seeing two of them. But here you can see a few more of them in the background. There might have been an incident that happened earlier on in the afternoon. I can't remember, but then this is not uncommon in places like St. Kilda with heavy, you know, youth presence going on. Thanks to anyone else who just joined. I've got Trung An Nguyen, Erwin TRC, sorry. May I ask if you used the 85B filter? No, I did not. So when it comes to shooting Kodak Vision 500T, I don't bother filtering. I just, because I'm scanning it digitally, I just correct the white balance when I'm running it through Negative Lab Pro. So if you're interested in all that sort of stuff, I'll save it for the end of the video. I'll talk a little bit more about the whole processing and scanning side of the film, because I know a lot of people are interested in that. And Kodak Vision is a great alternative, and it can save you money too, to buying films like Portra, and it works great on the street. It's a really high performance film when you get the most out of it. But going back to the roll, we're still in St. Kilda, and you can see it's around sunset. I saw this little group here and thought I would take a photo, but I, for whatever reason, blurred the shot. So it wasn't any good, therefore I stuck around and took a second one, which is here. And it is the better shot of the two. I think I fixed my composure, composition, and sort of focused on the front line of people, being this guy lighting the cigarette. I really wanted to get him mid-lighting of the cigarette. I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but you know, it's a great scene. I love that the sunset's in the background and there's just people out enjoying themselves. That was the mood, that was the atmosphere. Melbourne had just reopened, and yeah, I was just trying to enjoy the evening, not really focusing too much on the technical aspects of perfecting every single shot. And Shigaiva in the chat, hey man, I thought you'd joined, thanks for jumping on. Moose, the fun police, yeah, you could call it that. This shot I quite like. Now I saw a lot of people crowding up towards this ledge with the benches in front of it, and they were all kind of paying attention to this beautiful sunset that was happening that you can see in the previous shot. You know, the sky was lighting up, it was a beautiful sunset, and yeah, and it was hitting a lot of the people's faces. You can kind of see that there, and creating this really nice lighting. So I tried to make this shot that had a good spread of things happening throughout it. There was this interesting interaction happening here with these guys, kind of, you know, looking over towards these two girls. I don't know if they knew them or if they were kind of just like checking them out or whatever, just, you know, people being themselves and whatever. And these two are out here taking photo of the sunset, and just a lot going on. Perhaps it's a little bit too much going on because of the fact that there's the building behind them, but I don't mind the shot. But I think because of all that distraction, what I did is I tried to recompose and get a little bit more negative space. So I've got these two shots from the same scene, and you can see they look quite different. Maybe I moved down the ledge a little bit, but yeah, I kind of like what's happening in the first one, but I like the composition of the second one. But really, I can't decide on the two. I just sort of tried to put multiple groups of people within the same frames. Trung, wasn't there a brawl at St. Kilda Beach? Were you able to capture anything when it happened? There was a brawl at a different beach that I was at. It wasn't St. Kilda. I was out shooting with Damon. There was a massive brawl down further down the coast. But yeah, with St. Kilda, that's what I was trying to remember, whether or not there was a brawl that day, because you know, it makes it sound like I live in somewhere really terrible. But no, I don't think there was a massive brawl on the day that I was out shooting. I can't remember what specific day this was, but yeah. And no worries, no one on that. Kodak motion picture is epic for that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a great film. So yeah, I think I wrapped up my day of shooting. As mentioned, previous to this, I was already shooting for about an hour or two on different film stocks, and then I was heading out to towards the roads to the main strip to kind of move on for the day and meet you know, Sarah and a friend for dinner. And then I took this shot. I just thought it was a nice scene. People were kind of still arriving to the beachside area, and you had these two girls kind of walking into the shot. And what I had done is just sort of framed up this like massive building in front of Luna Park and the palm trees, just to give this sort of like St. Kilda snapshot. And knowing that they were walking into the frame, I kind of focused on the foreground area, and then they saw me and interacted with the camera, and I thought it made for a good shot, so I clicked it, and I think it just gives this sort of snapshot aesthetic. And then moving down to the main area, it had gotten dark, but the great thing about Kodak Vision 500T is with the artificial lights coming from a place like this shop, it works great. You know, you got that tungsten balance, so not much need for correction when scanning. And although it is a little bit dark, I'm shooting handheld, the lens is only f2.8, it's still not bad. A bit of grain shows up, but you know, in the areas with a little bit more exposure, it's a lot cleaner. But again, shooting wide open at nighttime with a 2.8 lens isn't the best, and I tend to expose Kodak Vision 500T at around 400 in my mind/eye metering. I don't really use a meter on the MA, and I just kind of, for example, with this situation, go wide open, use a fairly hand-holdable shutter speed, which would have been about a 30th of a second. And then further down the road, there was this scene here inside of a hairdressing shop. I just noticed it was interesting the way I saw someone's feet just popping up from behind this wall. It took me by surprise. It's not a great shot, but I just thought it was an interesting scene, so I took the photo. And yeah, why I don't like it is probably that it's quite messy and there's really not too much else happening in it. Now this is on a different day, and I'm out in the late morning most likely, and at this great colorful fruit and veggie store, I noticed these two guys getting the shop ready to open up in the morning, and they're opening up the awning on top of the store, stacking up the fruits as you can see there, and I just thought it was a nice scene to capture with the sort of stark contrast of the black clothes that they're wearing, the bold colors of the fruits being lit up by the sun, and the relatively dark, shadowy interior of the store. So I took this shot, tried to place this guy in the foreground, and this other guy that you may have only just noticed in the opposite third over here. But I feel like he gets a little bit lost in the darkness behind him, so it's not the greatest shot, but I still enjoy it, and how I got my shadow on this guy's back. This is in the same morning, having noticed this box of Corona with an empty bottle and then this mask right next to it. I just thought it was a funny scene, basically. Not technically a great shot, but just a funny slice of time. Looking back at this later, it might look more interesting. And I've got Sean in the live chat. Afternoon. Hey mate, thanks for joining. Hope you've been well, back on your feet. Love seeing more street photos from you again. Yeah, so that's what it's all about. We've reopened. I'm getting back out there, shooting more street, which is heaps of fun. So just coming back to Lightroom, this was an accidental shot, so I don't know why I left that on there. I think now it's approaching the end of October. So this roll goes across October and November, I believe. And this would have been Halloween. People are dressed up around the city. This shot, you know, they kind of noticed my presence and the fact that I was taking a photo. They semi-posed for the shot, but it is nothing special. And I kind of moved on throughout the city and was just shooting as per usual, and I caught this scene here, which was quite nice, with the red sort of cloak covering what would normally be a small pop-up coffee store here in the GPO building of Melbourne, and the way that the H&M shadows were casted on this wall was quite interesting, and it doesn't normally happen year-round, and I just thought that was a nice little touch, you know, being a big fashion store, and I kind of just camped here for a little bit. I don't often use the fishing technique when shooting street, but with this scenario I thought it was good. And this guy walks out looking ultra fashionable, which kind of lended itself well, almost like this kind of little runway-esque kind of scene here. Yeah, very rock, like hard rock goth kind of look. But yeah, I kind of wish there was more happening. What I really had hoped for when I was sitting here camping was that there would be, let's say, someone hanging out over here, someone walking through where this guy is, and another person walking in across from the side of the frame, really filling up the frame. So that's what I would have wished for in the future with a scene like this, but you can't always control those variables. This next shot on the roll, what caught my interest was just this guy's appearance with this shiny jacket and just the way he had this mask on over his nose, and this, what I initially thought was a cigarette, but then having looked back at the scan, looks like maybe it's just the stick from a lollipop or something sticking out of his mouth, and the ear pods mirroring the direction of that thing, and he's walking down the street on his phone, oblivious to my presence and taking the photo. However, I just think that it doesn't really work. It doesn't really tell much of a story. I wish it was maybe closer, because the fact I'm shooting a 35mm, you'd really have to be close, and would it really be worth it for a shot like this where there's just the one element to the scene, the singular person with the interesting look going on. But in the same vicinity, which was Chinatown, I took this shot, which was quite an interesting moment to be in because of the nature of the light. If you really pay attention, you'll see that there's shadows being cast forward towards myself and then also backwards. If you look behind this guy, there's a shadow going this way on this angle and then forwards on that angle with all the subjects, because the light's actually bouncing off one of the buildings, presumably somewhere behind here out of the scene, and then from in front. So the light, when it comes from two directions, if you're ever out on the street shooting, you really want to take advantage of these situations when you have this bi-directional light, which can really create something surreal and special, and kind of reminds me of the photography of someone like Trent Park, having shot heavily in Sydney for himself. And when I've traveled to Sydney, I do notice all the tall buildings, the reflective buildings, can create this really ideal lighting situation when you're on the street that is definitely worth taking advantage of, and creates a very surreal look, especially when you have these dark areas in the background. Really has this 3D pop, makes everyone pop out of the scene. Initially, I was just drawn to the fact that these guys had these big happy birthday balloons, and you know, obviously one of these guys noticed my presence, but I kind of stuck around and tried to wait for more people to fill in the scene and create more of an atmosphere. And that's what I'm saying. When you have one person as opposed to multiple elements in the scene, whether it's just the interesting light, the multiple characters, the gestures, whatever it could be, you create a much more dynamic scene out on the street. And that's what I'm trying to look for when I'm out there. And Sean just saying that the last photo managed to capture the girl between the two faces. Yeah, that was not intended. That was a fluke. But it is a nice placement there. And hey, Tetenal, thanks for joining. Late entrance, no worries. It is a weird time, as I mentioned earlier in the stream. And don't do much street photography here. What comes to your mind when you see someone looking at you and as you point the camera at them? Well, initially this would be something that probably would have deterred me, but generally speaking, you know, I try not to worry about it too much. If anything, I just kind of smile and or nod my head and just kind of keep going. And as far as they're concerned, I'm pretty far back from them. I'm not getting right up in someone's face in this situation, and I'm taking a photo of the overall scene, including them in it. So I'm not obviously doing anything wrong, and as long as I don't act like I'm doing something wrong, just give that friendly interaction, usually there's no problem whatsoever. And Trung just commenting on, gotta love the fluky moments with that person, yeah. And Sean, the balloon, for some reason made me think the balloon was the jacket. Oh yeah, it does blend in a bit with the guy's jacket, as if it could be. Yeah. Alright, so with this next scene, this is one of the situations where I, again, saw this wider sort of a scene of multiple things happening, multiple people, spearheaded by this guy in the foreground on the bicycle, you know, having a break, presumably having a drink. And then, as you can see from the series of shots at the bottom, I really stuck around and worked this scene. So you've got multiple shots in the series, and when I see an opportunity like this is when I really try and stick around and you know, do what you would call working the scene and try and create the best possible composition, because there's so much happening, so much to keep track of within any one of these scenes. It means that every little slight movement from the left to the right is going to make a difference, and that's really how you're composing, especially with the wider lenses. You need to, you know, obviously make this tiny adjustment to bring something else into the composition, which then might knock something else out of the composition. And that's what I'm trying to do when I'm out in a situation like this. And in this situation, you've got that guy in the foreground that I mentioned, but then there's people behind him being kind of lost, and they're not really adding too much to that situation. And then over here you've got this person and a few other people, and my mind can only keep track of so much. So after taking the first shot, you know, I'm trying to constantly move around and change the composition, and just by that simple movement of stepping a little bit to the left, you've really made quite a difference here in bringing these two into the frame and then maintaining everything else that's going on in the background there. So putting those side by side, you can see I did crop this shot a little bit, but yeah, it's quite a difference. Just that minor movement, and obviously the fact that the timing was different. When this guy was taking a drink here, his face was obscured. So I kind of preferred that when he'd raised, sorry, brought his elbow back down, his arm back down, you can see a bit of his face here. You can see these people. I love that this guy is now stretching his leg in this interesting gesture added to the scene there. And just the color distribution, this woman in the bright red, the yellow, the blue, the beautiful weather with the blue sky in Federation Square here in Melbourne really made me want to stick around and keep working this scene. But as you can see, I'm kind of moving around. Sorry, that was the same two shots. And yeah, it wasn't really necessarily getting any better. And this one was completely blurry. So I don't know why I did that. I think I was trying to move back, maybe stop down and get more depth of field, having worried that this guy wouldn't be in focus. But, you know, he was all along. But when you're shooting on film, you don't know that. So that was that. Out of that series, I did end up preferring the second shot in the series. This one, which I've kind of cropped and fixed up, and the one that I was happiest with. And although he had left the scene, I still tried to make versions of the photo without the guy in the foreground, and I still quite like them. But I think I prefer it with the guy in the foreground, at risk of it being quite messy. So I'm kind of now looking back at them, not too sure which ones I prefer, to be honest. I'd really like this shot and this one here. Actually, out of these two, so you could look at these as being from the same similar moment, and you can see my shadow there. But what makes the difference here is that a second later, this couple here is doing a selfie, which adds a little bit of an element to it. And this guy here is looking over to me. So he's another guy taking photos, obviously just hanging out. And just that little interaction kind of adds a little bit to the scene, I think. And then the extra seagull. You can see from the shadow that I only made a minor adjustment to my position just to kind of change up that composition. And yeah, neither of them are great photos, but this is just to kind of get you guys thinking about little ways you can change things up on the street when you're out trying to make compositions like this, if this is your style. I don't know if it is. But moving on to another example, this was another little scene I saw with a bunch of different people, and I'm trying to compose to get a few of them into the shot. And initially I had taken this one with this family hanging out by the statue, the couple having this intimate moment in the background, and a guy sitting in the foreground. I tried to create a composition where I could fit that all in. It did work. And then I think this guy kind of noticed me, and or whether or not it was because he noticed me, he moved on, he moved out of the scene. And then I'd taken the second one as an alternative version, and I noticed someone else was coming in through the scene there. But in this situation, I do prefer the first one. So again, it is oftentimes worth taking that extra shot, whether or not it ends up being any better than the previous one. Most people don't really care that you take a picture with them in it. Well, generally not. I feel like if you're pretty quick and non-intrusive, most people don't really seem to care, and if you're friendly about it, if they notice you. This one here was, again, because it's Halloween, someone in costume, and she had this amazing face paint slash, makeup prosthetic. I don't know what it was. It was sort of special effects makeup. What looked like, a demon or demonic character out of an anime or something like that. And she was sitting here eating some McDonald's, which I found fascinating. She's sitting down from presumably having come back from some Halloween festivities or activity with friends maybe, and then having a break, eating some Maccas. And I just thought that was an interesting scene. She did notice me in this situation. I did say, hey, that's awesome, makeup. Can I take a photo? And she said, yeah, sure. And I said, yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Don't mind me. And I just made the photo. So it has that candid kind of look, especially because her eyes are obscured. But in reality, it wasn't a candid shot. But I thought it was interesting anyway, just to kind of give this, again, slice of time into the 31st of October, Halloween of 2021, and this funny kind of situation with the girl in full costume eating some Krispy Kreme and some McDonald's here at Fed Square. All right, so we're getting towards the last part of the roll, and now I'm still at Fed Square on Halloween. I've noticed that these people dressed up as angels are walking around dinging these bells. It was some kind of promotional thing that they were doing. I can't quite remember, but I think it had to do with either climate change or some kind of cause that they were promoting, because someone within their group was also handing out pamphlets. And yeah, given the beautiful weather and the fact that the light was getting quite low, it made for some really interesting scenery. And I had taken the shot, and then they had gone away somewhere. I came back to Fed Square and noticed these people were still sitting here. So I made another photo of this scene where I was a little bit closer, and this guy was still here taking photos of the seagulls. He was interacting with the birds, and there were the characters here. So this is not too far off from those previous versions of that scene. But then I noticed that the angel people came back in towards Fed Square, and the way that they were completely backlit by the sun gave a very kind of, you know, City of Angels kind of, you know, vibe, very kind of dreamy, surreal look, something you just wouldn't expect. And if you hadn't known what was going on, you would be a little bit unusual. So I tried to frame Flinders Street Station in the background there, tried to get a little bit lower so that the sun would appear more backlit and give this flary, dreamy look. You can see a bit of a lens flare happening here. I don't mind it too much because with the Zeiss lens, it still handles, you know, the scene fairly well. And then I made a darker exposure, and you can see that the shadows go a lot darker, but also the way it was scanned in changed a lot between the two because of the very different density on the negative. But because this scene was quite bright, the sun is blown out. But I made a darker exposure, maybe at 1,000th of a second and a high f-stop, just to try and get a little bit more detail in, and it did work. It creates a little bit more of this rim light silhouette kind of look. And Ben Neo, sorry. Did I use a filter? No, I didn't. So I don't use any warming filters with tungsten film. I just do the white balancing when I'm scanning it. And it works great, as you can see with this daylight balance shot. Yeah, it works fine. There is a bit of a bluish tone to the shadows, but you could go ahead and warm that up even further if you wanted to, if you were ever going to do something like this. And again, being processed in C41, I really am happy with the results. I don't notice any weird color shifts or any additional grain compared to ECN2 that I've, 500T that I've had processed in ECN2, which I have had done, and I've looked at them side by side. I don't notice any major benefit. But yeah, back again to that scene, back to the angels, because they've gone back and done another lap, crossing over to the other side of Flinders Street Station, the other side of the road here. And I tried again to get low, get that sun right behind them, create this really backlit, dreamy kind of look. And I quite like this shot, actually. Out of all the angel ones, this was probably my favorite. But let me know what you think. Out of these three, which one you like the most? Obviously, this one having been a bit overexposed, I don't think that works as well as these two. All right, last few shots on the roll. So I'm moving down. There was another group, another member of the group from the angel people. And then what I found amusing was that looking down the pathway, I saw these guys dressed up as ghosts and kind of, you know, maybe there were other characters, more monstrous, you know, demonic, let's say, you know, good versus evil kind of mixture happening here. So I tried to anticipate their arrival by setting myself up in front of this woman on the right who was in the angel costume. And interestingly enough, you know, she's wearing this sort of wreath on her head, but you can notice that behind her at this part of the bridge on St. Kilda Road or Swanston Street, there is a wreath perfectly behind her there. I don't know if that was a coincidence or if she sat there as an intentional thing, but yeah, that was interesting. And these guys walk into the scene and this guy kind of tips his glasses at me and looks over, but it is a little bit motion blurred. And I had quickly advanced the film and cocked the shutter and taken a second shot as he walked out of the scene and the next two people in his group walked in, and you can see she's looking over at them. And I do like this interaction, you know, where he looks like he or she, I don't know, it could be looking over at this woman, and there is that kind of polarity of characters. You've got the, you know, the Halloween ghosts on the left and this like angel on the right. So I just thought that was interesting, a little bit corny, but of course I couldn't help but take the shot. And then I quickly advanced, took a third shot as the last character in the group walked past, but it was no good. It was just sort of, yeah, not as good as the other two. and there was no, you know, facial presence there. The person was looking away. And yeah, that's it, guys. I am at the end of the roll here and just fired off one last shot as another group of young guys in full Halloween costumes skated through the scene, coming from the opposite direction. And as you can see, this is the last shot on the roll. And you have that little burn mark there. And as a photo, I don't really like it. It's not too much happening, kind of a bit of a panning shot, so there is that blur in the background and there's no interesting gesture. I did like that this guy was in this chicken outfit, is that what it is? A rooster. And yeah, it would have been cool if I had maybe composed a bit lower. If these guys were out in costume too, that might have made it a little bit more interesting. Alright guys, so that is the roll. That is this episode of Street Process, of the Contact Sheets Street Process live stream. Let me know what you think. If you're new to this, would you watch more of these? I try and do them every now and then. And I have previously done one of these streams where it was someone else's photos. So if you're interested in submitting your contact sheet and a bunch of photos you shot on the street, jump on the Discord server and submit them there. I have a contact sheets channel on the Discord server. And Owen in the chat, would help a lot if you could make one about how to balance the color using 500T without filter. Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into that a little bit, why not? And give you a bit of background. So when it comes to shooting tungsten balance film, you can put an 85 or any kind of warming filter on there, but it really isn't too necessary if you don't want to. If you're scanning the film yourself, or if you're working with a lab that understands that it's tungsten film and they can, you know, fix the white balance, meaning they would be increasing the yellow and magenta when they scan. Some labs don't do that. They just let it run on auto, in which case you would get very blue shots. Then you could correct them if you wanted in Lightroom, but it's always good to have a good starting point. So working with a lab that will understand how to balance tungsten film, or scanning yourself, allows you to shoot 500T or any tungsten film without needing you know, to put a physical filter on there and lose the one stop of light or whatever it is. Fluke, wanting, yeah, more videos like this. Yeah, good to know. I'm glad. And Krishna, are these cross-processed? Technically, yes, they are processed in C41, but the C41 process is chemically very similar to the ECN2 process. There are some key differences, but overall it's not that different as to be as drastic as doing it in E6, for example. But yeah, if you are interested in all of that, jump on the channel, guys. As you can see here, not too long ago, I did a video, and it's not showing up on the home page, but if you scroll back a little bit, let's just go to videos. You'll see it here, called batch scanning. Sorry, this one, batch scanning film with a digital camera. So if you're interested in how I do the scanning process, how do I color correct? It's all done using Negative Lab Pro. That's the software I use. It's actually quite good at automatically picking up on the white balance if you use what's called the auto color feature, and it does a great job. Like I said, you don't have to do too much. You can also choose one of the color options when scanning through NLP called Cine T. They have Cine D for daylight and Cine T for tungsten. By choosing the Cine T preset in Negative Lab Pro, and then I scan them all as a batch. So it's done all at once, and then I make minor adjustments as I finalize them. And then once they're all positive JPEGs in Lightroom, I can then go ahead and make further edits beyond that. So the self-scanning really opens up a lot of doors. If you are interested in more, you can also go on to my blog article or website. I have it linked in the description. I have a video linked in the description, which is the one I mentioned, the batch scanning, but I have a written article version of that. So if you were to go on the website, you'll see that I have a full breakdown of what I use, including the embedded video here on YouTube that I did, all the equipment I use, all my tips, and a lot of things that might help you if you're fairly new to scanning your own film at home. Because I know this is getting more popular, And again, I have my links to Negative Lab Pro and all the hardware I use and all my other videos and the whole scanning shebang. So if you're really into that, check it out. Also, if you like street photography and you like physical printed work, check out my zine. I have a link in the description as well. It's called The Sun-Dried Strip, and it is available on my website. And you can see that it's a slightly different style of street photography than the stuff I was just going through. Not very people heavy. It's more kind of like these little close-up scenes of this old shopping strip that I was shooting. So feel free to check that out. And if you want, the link to my blog is there where I mentioned this article. And just jumping back to the live chat, really like the H&M shot and the third angel shot. Thank you. From Melanie. Great photos and I enjoy the roll review. Thanks. And Fluke, is it hard to develop Vision 3 yourself? Not really. It's not too much harder than developing any other C41 film. There's just an added extra step of removing the remjet layer. And if you look up videos on YouTube on how to do that, it's generally where you pre-soak the film in some warm water, working temperature water and baking soda. You shake it around, dump the water a few times, and that washes off most of the remjet layer. So it's not too bad. And then when you finish the final step, you kind of just rub off any remaining remjet on the film. Otherwise, it's really not too bad. Just a few comments saying the zine is good. So glad to know there's some testimonials in there. And yeah, so the remjet stuff, that is the only extra step you have to worry about. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to wrap this up now. And if you're watching this post-stream, again, feel free to check out any of those extra links and videos that I mentioned. I've got a lot of content on scanning, on shooting cinema film, Negative Lab Pro, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to do an updated video on Negative Lab Pro because they've launched version 2.3. All these other articles. I've got the zine I mentioned, and also check out the Instagram page. Any of my Australian followers that are here, if you're not already aware, we're doing a giveaway. So I'm giving away the Canonet QL17 and this brick that you can see here of Kodak Color Plus 200 to 2 lucky Australian winners. So it's an Australian resident only giveaway, but if you're not already in this, check it out, share it with your other fellow film shooters based here in Australia if they want to enter it too. It's going to be drawn by the end of the month, and it's the Canonet QL17 as a first prize, and the Kodak Color Plus 10 roll brick as a second prize, and a copy of the zine for each of the winners. So yeah, interesting. I got another person who likes the H&M shot. Yeah, interesting to see what other people like, because that wasn't necessarily my favorite on the roll, but I do like that shot. It's not bad. I like the colors. Again, I just wish there was more happening. So yeah, guys, that's it for all the different, you know, extra links and whatever I wanted to mention. Also, I wanted to lastly mention the Discord server. If you're not on the Discord server, I've almost got 1,000 members on here now, which is great. The community is constantly growing, getting bigger, thriving, and you've got all these different channels you can participate in, including technical advice where you can ask for help with things like scanning cinema film or whatever it might be. So check it out and let me know if you join. And I'm sure you'll get a welcome from myself or someone else. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. And a couple of last live chats, Chigiva, H&M, Hashman, Matt. Yeah, should be. We should open our own store. All right, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you all on the next one.